She tried to get me fired over my boob job, so I brought the receipts and watched her pack her desk. 4 years ago, I was 24 and grieving the unimaginable. My mom had just died of breast cancer. It wasn't the first time cancer had hit close to home either. Both of my grandmothers had also died from it. That kind of pattern doesn't just sit quietly in the back of your mind, it screams. So I went to a specialist to get screened. I didn't expect anything earth-shattering, but they found precancerous cells in one of my breasts. It wasn't cancer yet, but the risk was high, too high to ignore. I was given 3 choices. 1, get screened every few months until it turned into cancer, if it ever did. 2, remove the one breast with the affected cells, but continue monitoring the other. 3, get a bilateral mastectomy, remove all breast tissue and eliminate the risk. I chose the third. The most extreme, yes. But after watching cancer destroy 3 women in my family, I wasn't going to gamble with my life. I was warned about scarring, but told it would be minimal. That turned out to be a lie. What I was left with were 2 brutal, jagged pink scars on either side of my chest, each about 1 inch long, raised, angry looking. I spiraled. The depression hit hard. I couldn't even look at myself. I threw away every mirror in my flat and stopped leaving the house. The reflection of those scars made me physically sick. Eventually, I started therapy, and my therapist, who usually didn't suggest stuff like this, recommended I talk to a plastic surgeon. At first, it was just about scar reduction. The cream didn't work. Laser treatments were risky and expensive. That left implants. I had been a natural F-cup. I chose DDs, slightly smaller, but enough to hide the scars. And honestly, that decision changed everything. My mental health improved. I could finally look at myself and not hate what I saw. My confidence came back. I felt human again. The scars that once made me feel like a walking wound were now hidden, and my body finally felt like mine again. Fast forward to now. I'm 28 and working in an office job. Life's finally steady. I'm doing okay. Until Jill. She's a coworker, the kind who smiles in your face and talks behind your back, loud enough for you to hear. She overheard an old friend joking about how I might not make it through airport security with my implants, and boom. By the end of the day, the whole office knew I'd had a boob job. Not why, just that I'd had one. Jill seemed especially obsessed. She started making little jabs constantly. I'd walk by and hear her say I had more plastic than Barbie, or that I was fake in 2 ways. One coworker told me she even referred to me as a sack of silicone. All of this while I sat a few desks away, trying to do my job. She once even made a snide comment about the NHS, like she thought taxpayers had funded my surgery. For the record, I had the mastectomy through the NHS, but I paid out of pocket for therapy and implants. Not that it should matter. I asked her to stop, more than once, but I only ever caught her in places like the lift or bathroom, no witnesses, no proof. And the jabs didn't stop. 3 times a week for 3 straight months, I heard something. And then came the moment. We were eating lunch with some coworkers, chatting casually. I said something was shallow, and Jill, without missing a beat, looked at me, gestured to my chest, and said, "You'd know all about being shallow." I snapped. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Do you know why I have these?" A few years ago, doctors found potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I was advised to get a mastectomy and was left with huge, ugly scars across my chest. I went to therapy because I couldn't even look in the mirror without crying. My therapist sent me to a cosmetic surgeon, and I got implants, not for fun, not for attention, but because I needed to feel like a person again. So maybe next time you want to judge someone for having cosmetic surgery, you should ask them why first. Then I picked up my food and walked out. For the rest of that day, things were tense. About a third of my coworkers came up to quietly offer support, telling me they had no idea what I'd been through, that I was brave for speaking up. The rest? Not so supportive. I kept hearing whispers that I'd overreacted, that Jill was just joking, and that I was being a bitch about it. My response? Well, Jill was being a bitch long before I was. By that evening, an email from HR landed in my inbox. Subject line, meeting request, hostile work environment. And guess who the complaint was about? Not Jill. Me. I called HR for clarification. The woman who answered casually dropped, "We're just following up on a potential hostile work environment situation." Which, side note, is a super American phrase for a UK office. But okay, what really made my stomach turn? The sender of the email, Debbie. Debbie, HR rep, and Jill's bestie. I knew immediately this wasn't going to be a fair fight, so I made a decision. If they wanted to come for me, they better be ready. I spent that night building my case like my career depended on it, because, honestly, it might have. Somewhere in the dusty corners of my memory, I remembered my employee contract mentioning something about conflict resolution. I found the complaints section and boom, there it was. A clause stating that if I believed the reviewer was biased, I had the right to request an impartial overseer. I photocopied the page and highlighted the hell out of that line. This was going to be my shield. Next, I started messaging coworkers who had previously shown support. I kept it short and direct. HR's asked to meet with me. Do you remember Jill making comments to you about me? Would you be willing to write and sign a short statement about what you heard and when? Some were scared to speak out. Understandable, since Jill had HR wrapped around her finger. But 20 people agreed to help, nearly half the office. I couldn't believe it. I jotted down a timeline of the times I'd asked Jill to stop, based on my arrival at work, lunch breaks, and when I'd clocked out. I also made a list of everyone who was there for the lunchroom incident and the exact time it happened, since I knew HR would have access to the CCTV. The next morning, I got in early and started collecting statements. Not everyone had something printed, but 16 people handed me signed letters. Here's the general gist of what they said. My name is Name. I work with Jill and me. On or around date, I heard Jill say exact comment about me. I found it inappropriate as it directly referenced her appearance. Jill has made comments like this regularly for months. I'm willing to go on record further. Signed. Some letters even included bulleted lists of Jill's remarks, not just about me, but other coworkers too. Apparently, Jill had been making comments about one person's weight and had made an anti-Semitic jab about another's nose. So no, it wasn't just me. Jill had been building her own case file without even realizing it. Now, out of an office of 45 people, 16 statements might not be a majority, but it was more than enough to raise some serious red flags. At 10 a.m. sharp, I walked into HR carrying my little justice folder. Inside, 16 signed coworker letters, a photocopy of my contract with the impartial overseer clause highlighted, my personal timeline of events and witness names. Debbie greeted me at her desk, fully ready to usher me into a private room. Hi, I said, calm and composed. I turned to the other HR rep nearby and asked, so will this meeting be with you then? Debbie blinked. No, it's with me. I smiled, pulled out the contract page, and replied, actually, my contract says I have the right to request an impartial overseer, and I've been told you and Jill are quite close. She stared at the paper, tight-lipped. I didn't let it out of my hands. There was a shredder way too close for comfort. I can be impartial, she said stiffly. I'm sure you can, I said, still polite, but I'd prefer to follow protocol. I don't want to make this messy. I just want a fair review. That's when she stomped off to fetch the supervisor. Supervisor came in and asked why I didn't feel Debbie could be impartial. I calmly explained, because I've been told she and Jill are friends, and Jill is the one behind this complaint. He turned to Debbie. Is that true? All she said was, I can be impartial. Supervisor took a deep breath, looked at the other HR rep, and said, let's all go in together. Game on. We sat down. I opened my folder. I handed over everything, letters, statements, contract copy, timelines. I even thanked them for accommodating my request. I was doing everything by the book. Debbie? She looked like she'd swallowed glass. She clearly came in ready to bury me. Instead, she had to sit there while her friend's dirty laundry got aired out in 16 different fonts and formats. And I wasn't done yet. The HR interview felt like a marathon. They asked me the same questions over and over, just phrased slightly differently. Classic HR tactic. It dragged on for over 30 minutes, but here's the condensed highlight reel version. You said outside that you think Jill reported you. Why? A. Jill's had an issue with me for about 3 months now. Why didn't you come to HR when you realized there was a problem? I had no issue with her. She had an issue with me. What issue exactly? 4 years ago, doctors found potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I had a double mastectomy to eliminate the risk. The surgery left me with severe scarring. I went to therapy for the depression that followed and was referred to a plastic surgeon. I got implants to cover the scars so I could look in the mirror without crying. All of this is in my medical file, which HR has permission to review. Jill found out about the implants, but not the cancer, and decided that made me fair game. Why do you believe this is true? Because I brought receipts, literally. Here are 16 signed witness statements from coworkers confirming that Jill gossiped about my implants to the entire office, made inappropriate comments repeatedly, and even quoted what she said and when. Rough dates and times? No one was taking notes because none of us expected things to escalate, but they did what they could from memory. What event led directly to this harassment complaint? Jill's harassment started when she exposed my personal medical decision to the office without my consent. But if you're talking about her complaint against me, then it was probably what happened yesterday in the lunchroom. Jill made a snide comment about me being shallow and gestured to my chest. I snapped and explained, calmly but firmly, what I had actually gone through. There were cameras in the lunchroom, so I told HR they could check the footage to confirm everything. I also handed over a list of everyone who had been there that day, 6 people total, including me and Jill. One of them had already submitted a signed statement detailing exactly what they saw and heard. Had you ever directly asked Jill to stop? A. Yes. Multiple times over the last 3 months. I was clear, calm, and respectful every single time. I told her comments were inappropriate and hurtful, and I asked her to stop. Did Jill know about the cancer? No. All she heard was a joke about my implants. She never knew why I got them. And honestly, I didn't feel the need to lay out my medical history just to get her to stop harassing me. I shouldn't have to justify surviving cancer to earn basic respect. At that point, the supervisor stood up, shook my hand, and said they'd be reviewing everything: the letters, the CCTV footage, my personal documentation, and anything else already on record. I nodded, thanked them, and walked out. Back at my desk, I opened my CV. I genuinely thought this was the end of the line, that no matter how clean my record was, HR would side with Jill and I'd be out the door by the end of the week. Then, about an hour later, HR started calling people in. First was the coworker who'd submitted a statement and was present for the lunchroom conversation. Gone for about 10 minutes. Came back looking like they'd just dropped a truth bomb. Then came the rest of the lunchroom crew, called in one by one. Each returned with that same, "you're not gonna believe what just happened" look. After that, it was the others, those who had written letters but hadn't been at lunch. HR didn't miss a beat. Some meetings were quick, others ran long. But by around 3:30, every single person who had spoken up for me had been interviewed. And then came Jill's turn. She got called in last. I watched her walk in cool and confident, and 30 minutes later, she came back furious, red-faced, fuming, eyes locked on me like she was about to breathe fire. I didn't react. I just kept typing. At around 4:30, she got called in again. By 5 p.m., the office had that familiar end-of-day shuffle. People were packing up, sliding into coats, shutting down monitors, and then Jill reappeared. Except this time, she didn't return to her desk. She attacked it, grabbing files, slamming drawers, shoving everything into a cardboard box like she was trying to beat the clock. She didn't cry. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked furious. She started loudly telling anyone within earshot that I had gotten her fired, that it was all my fault, that I had turned everyone against her. And then, with one final death glare in my direction, she shoved her way into the lift and disappeared. A few seconds later, an email pinged into my inbox from HR. "Your case is now closed." That was it. No follow-up meeting, no warning, no write-up, just closure. I sat at my desk in total silence, watching the screen, letting it all settle in. No celebration, no smile, just quiet relief. Justice had finally done its job.